meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 1st of May, 2024, and this is the Cluster API Office Hours meeting. Cluster API is a subproject of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidance, which basically means please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. At the beginning of our meetings, we like to welcome new attendees or new community members who might like to introduce themselves. So if that sounds like you, please raise your hand. I'll call on you and say hi to the group. All right. I am not seeing any hands going up, although I do see Young Xiang, I think, has unmuted. Did you wanna say hi, Young Xiang?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay. Actually, it's not my first time to attend. I think I attended a couple before. So I attended here. Mainly, I want to know what's the current relationship between the UKS Anywhere and Class API. Well, Class API cover everything offered by UKS Anywhere.
I missed the last part of that. I was going to add it as a question to our agenda. Will it cover everything
offered by UKS Anywhere?
Okay. So normally we address these questions during our meeting hours. So why don't we get to that during the general discussion then?
Okay. Nice.
Thank you, Yang Sheng, and welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So let's move on to our open proposals readout. I don't think we have any open proposals. We don't. So let's get into our discussion topics. It looks like, Matt, you've got a bunch here. So why don't you start us off with enabling changes to the node resource naming?
Yeah, I've really only got two things. The second two are kind of the same thing. What we've got is we've got an issue. One of our users has got an issue. They can't upgrade to CAPI 1.7 because a change in CAPI 1.7 changed the names of infrastructure machine objects, which meant that all of their which then bubbles down to host names and node names. And they have a bunch of internal requirements that for nebulous organizational reasons that shall not be explained, nodes need to be named in a particular way. So the specific most pressing problem they have is that KCP, so with a machine deployment, you can replace a machine deployment in an existing cluster. With a KCP, you can't replace the KCP that lives for the lifetime of the cluster, which basically means that all of their control plane nodes have been renamed and they can't put them back into organizational compliance. So we're looking for two things. One is a way to stop the bleeding, and we've kind of got agreement on that. In the issue, the user who's Leonard, by the way, Pottering, who's a co-maintainer of Capo and Cap M3 as well. He's proposed adding a feature gate to CAPI 1.7, which will enable the old behavior. So it will make the CAPI controllers continue to use the name of the infra template when creating infra objects. So my immediate request is it felt like, so there's been quite a lot of discussion about this, and I felt like there was agreement that we should have that workaround. Lennart has proposed this specific workaround, and he stuck a hold on it to reach consensus about the general direction. My immediate question is, can we confirm consensus in this meeting? Can we let Lennart go ahead and merge PR 10511? Yeah, so that's point one. I'll shut up. Can we get consensus on that?
Great question, Matt. Does anyone have thoughts about this? I'm not familiar with this specific issue, but it seems pretty straightforward. Like, want to add a feature gate into the current version that would allow users to turn on the feature gate so that they could get the old behavior of being able to rename infrastructure machine template objects. I guess, are there any objections to putting this feature gate in? Let's start there. Man, silence seems like approval. It's not. I'll just note, Matt, it's not a particularly large meeting today. So maybe some of the core maintainers, like I don't see Stefan here. I think there are some European holidays today that might be affecting. Fabrizio, you've got your hand up, please.
So this is quite an interesting one. So I think that we have consensus on trying to help this user. Even if I would like to make it clear, the user was relying on something which is not granted by our contract. So we try to help them because it's feasible, but we cannot. If the user rely on something just because it is there, but it's not a contract, they are working on X, basically. So I think that there is consensus. Now, I don't remember discussion in detail. If I remember well, Stefan was saying, let's not use a feature gate because we are not really going through validation. Adding a feature gate, which is a really already deprecated, seems strange. Let's use a flag, but these are implementation details.
I think Chris makes a really interesting point in the chat here, though.
I'm sorry, but I disagree.
Okay.
So they should not worry about API contract, but those are the boundaries that as a project we have. And we put a lot of effort.
But like if I'm as an end user go to the cluster API website, finding the API contract and seeing what is guaranteed and what isn't is like impossible. I have no idea where to start. I have no idea how to check it off. I don't know how to validate what I am, and I'm not depending on what it's going to be guaranteed. I mean, Cluster API as a project seems to still have this idea that it's a building ground for like clouds to build their providers on top of, and that we don't have direct end users when we do. And I think it's kind of silly that we keep pointing at the contract as a defense flag instead of saying, like, here's a clear layout of the things we are not going to guarantee. So I don't mind having these boundaries. I think they're fair. Like, we only have so many people who can maintain it. But, like, let's make it clear what's guaranteed and what isn't guaranteed. And just saying the contract is an amorphous blob that end users don't understand.
That's a fair feedback. But who is going to improve it? Improving the contract or what is our documentation is a collaborative effort. So if it is not good enough, just send a PR. We put a lot of effort on it. Yeah, I understand it could be improved, everything could be improved, but and this should be a collaborative. Improving our documentation should be a collaborative effort. That's it. So
Yep, no, that's fair. And I just came out of a real spicy work meeting, so I'm a little charged up. So sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, oh, sorry, Matt, I didn't see your hand up. Please go ahead. You're still muted, Matt.
I was just going to say I'm speaking into the void. Yeah, that's a good point, Fabrizio. Yeah, I will say in this point, in this case, we've got two active Kubernetes SIGs maintainers on other projects. Also saying this is a problem and we're willing to write the code. So yeah, what I'm looking for here is agreement and a way forward. I'm not going to ask the Cappy core team to write any code. Just, you know, tell me what direction to go in, and we'll do the work.
Yeah, I understand, but let's take a step back. So, okay, Mike, could you kindly open the issue and scroll down to my last second comment? Scroll down. There is a lot of discussion, which is, so, by the way, we would like, this one, go up a little bit, go up. Okay, this one, okay. So, okay, this one. So the point is, there are a couple of things playing here, and we are talking about three different layers. One is how cluster API generates the name for the infrastructure machine. Okay, and we are talking about controlled object like machine deployments or KCP, which basically they own everything that's below. Okay, this one was affected, but there are two layers below. For instance, how the different provider decided to name things inside their providers. And this layer is totally unregulated today. Unfortunately, the community never got together to try to define standard. And so we have couple that generate objects starting from the infrastructure machine, but not everyone is doing the same. We have provider that add a cluster as a prefix, other not. We have provider that adds namespace as a prefix and other not. So this is, if you ask me what is the way forward, I can tell you, okay, what we do is that for 1.17, we put a patch on the change to mitigate the impact on the user. But if you want to fix this situation for the future, the community has to come together and define some guideline and transition together. Because if it is not a regulator, unfortunately, as a core copy project, I cannot bring together 30 provider. It is out of my reach. And the same goes from the level below. How do you name nodes? There is no regulation. There are folks that just let the kubeadmin, if you only look at kubeadmin, there are folks that let kubeadmin pick the name. There are folks that try to force the name. There are folks like AWS that they let the cloud provider set the name. So I understand you are asking a way forward, but the honest answer is that a way forward should be discussed and found all together. Because if as a community of provider, we don't came together, there will be always chaos in this part.
Yeah, Matt, go ahead, please.
So I think we've accidentally made progress in that direction, Fabrizio. So I'm actually, although it has caused a regression for us, I'm actually in favor of the change, because it makes the infrastructure machine and the machine have the same name. So, and this is a good thing. So yeah, having the machine and the infrastructure machine and the cloud resources all be named consistently is definitely a good thing.
And
I
that was
think
the intent of the change, make life
Yeah.
easier for everyone because they look at everything that derive from a CRD and should be named consistently.
so. Yeah, so this is all good. What that change has done is it has brought us slightly closer, or it has made the domain of infrastructure provider differences smaller. So if an infrastructure provider is basing their thing on the cluster name, that has not changed. If they're basing it on the infra-cluster name, that's a potential source of future breakage because I think they are different. If they're basing it on the machine or the infra machine, they're now the same. If they were doing something completely custom, then they were on their own anyway, and they don't care. So I think we are very nearly at the point by having made this change. We're very nearly at the point where the whole discussion is moot, because whatever you're doing the you're doing something consistent. So the only issue we have now is that the end result is user visible, and this has resulted in a user visible change. So the request is, rather than introduce more complexity in the middle of this stuff, which is now very conveniently all the same, can we just make a single change up at the top so that the original machine can be set according to the user's organizational requirements, and then everything below that gets the same name. So I've got ahead of myself here because I had two requests. Request one was, please can we get consensus on Leonard's workaround? So he can move forward with that immediately. And then step two is, how do we make it so he can upgrade from 1.7 to 1.8, which is a less urgent discussion and a separate discussion, I think. So yeah, are we able to get consensus on the workaround?
Well, I had my hand up because I wanted to ask a question. Basically, if the workaround is to put this feature gate in, if you turn the feature gate on, you can get the old behavior. Is there like an end date on that, or is that now something we just carry forward in perpetuity though? Because it sounds like we need it to get over this hump, but then do we want, because I'm not even sure we have consensus around adding that change. Because if I was understanding what Fabrizio was saying, maybe it would be preferable to address this in another way than adding the feature gate in, and unless I misunderstood what you were saying, Fabrizio.
I think that we have an agreement to try to help the user. Okay, then we have to discuss implementation detail on Lennart PR. I know Stefan has some opinion, he's not here. I cannot speak for him, but those are implementation detail. I think that for the workaround, we kind of agree. Okay, we understood that we are creating some issue to customer, which were relying on something that unfortunately is not defined as a contract. But we try to help them because it's possible and reasonably feasible. We also would like to get this fixed in a proper way. And this is what we are discussing on the issue. The discussion is not easy because what we are talking about requires consensus across all the providers. So I hope we can get something done by 1.7, but that's not something that's really depend by the community, not only by me. By the way, we have issue from 2 or 3 years stand around defining naming convention for infrastructure objects. No one really ever cared. So I hope that now it is an opportunity, because this, for the good or for the bad, what happened now show what happened if as a community we don't work together. So I hope that now folks, yeah, get a little bit of energy to invest on it.
Matt, please.
So what you're saying about what we need a way forward beyond 1.7 is actually a problem that I potentially have with Leonard's workaround solution. Leonard has submitted, if you notice that Leonard's PR is submitted against the release 1.7 branch, which means it will not be in 1.8 by default. And I think he added that in order to help get some consensus, so he could upgrade CAPI to 1.7 in the shortest possible time. My concern is that, as Fabrizio is saying, we don't have a path for him to stop using that yet. Should we put an end date on a workaround that we have no design to fix yet? That should we? Yeah. So if we really think that this is going to turn into something like the other PR, which was opened a couple of years ago, which I have read, and petered out through lack of interest, if we think that's going to happen, do we let Leonard put this in 1.7? Should it go on main and get deprecated as soon as we have a solution for it? That would be my preference.
I mean, that sounds like a reasonable plan to me on paper, but you know, it still means we have to put in this kind of patch for the moment to get over things. And you know, if I'm reading things correctly here, it sounds like that maybe, you know, maybe we don't have agreement about adding that feature gate patch. You know, that maybe it'd be preferable to solve this and then just solve it and not have to add the patch. Fabrizio, please.
Yeah, I don't know, because this was the result. The fact that this patch is now 1.7 was the result of a chat between Stefan and Lennart. And so what I can say, if it is in 1.7, we have a deadline, which is when 1.8 is out. And we have some incentive to address the discussion in a proper way, which I think this is healthy for the long term of the project. So I think that otherwise it will be a never solved project. So I'm kind of +1 of the current approach, but I don't know the background of the discussion.
Can I ask you, are there the fundamental difference between different naming conventions, especially can a user switch from one to another? So I just wonder whether that's underneath some more complex thing.
Well, with the part of the issue here is one of the resources that we're talking about, the infrastructure machine templates. Those are we have traditionally kept them immutable, right? And there's a change that's gone in that's changed the naming of that, and this is causing users who were expecting the old naming, you know, to be the way they want to, but now they're not able to like change the naming because we've changed the behavior of that. So what they'd like is a feature gate so that they can go in and just change the names on these specific resources to kind of get over the issue that they're having. You know,
Okay.
like I just wanted to comment on what Fabrizio was saying. I think like the one thing that I'm hearing that I think would be good to get a comment on, Matt, is like it would be good to get Stefan comment on the stuff. Like it would be good to have a conversation with him in the room. And I realize wait another week to have our next cluster API meeting, it might be too long given that 1.8 is coming, right? Like we're on the clock here. So I don't know if maybe you want to try and arrange a meeting with Stefan like tomorrow or Friday or something, like a working group meeting or something, just to get together and hash this out a little further. If commenting on the issue is not getting us what we want there, you know, or not getting us to a consensus, you know.
I was going to say something similar. Yeah, Fabrizio's mentioned that yeah, Stefan has been commenting on this and has been heavily involved in this and is not here. I don't want to take the whole meeting on something if we can't resolve it. So I'm more than happy to punt that to another time, be that next week or sooner if we can arrange it.
Okay, well, so why don't we table this back to the issue and the PR until we can get more input from Stefan. And it sounds like at the very least, the work is kind of already done for the PR. So like that's ready to go when we might need it. All right, thanks, Matt. I guess you've got the next topic as well. So please carry on to failure domains. Yeah,
this is one I've been thinking about for a long time. I had an old proposal up. I never liked any of the design work that I did on this the first time I was looking at it. And I saw, I think Fabrizio was doing some cleanup and closed my old thing and merged it with this new one. So I posted an outline in there. I think this is something that we're likely to want to work on in the near to medium term future. Yeah, essentially, I was wondering, has anybody looked at this already to the point where they can say, is it worth me spending a time to write a proper proposal? Yeah, because if what I put in that issue is essentially the sketch of a solution. I am aware that to be implemented, it'll need a proper proposal, which I hadn't written. I was kind of hoping to get enough feedback on the sketch to say whether or not I should spend time on a proper proposal. Again, if I don't want folks to go and read that in real time. Yeah, Joel's giving me a thumbs up. Yeah, so related to that was, if I can move on,
let me just take a census here quickly. Does anyone have like votes for or against Matt turning this into a proposal? Like, do we need more time for people to kind of read the issue and whatnot, and have a better discussion there? I realize the discussion's really thin at the moment. It's just, yeah. I mean, my feeling is like, you know, maybe turn it into a proposal and continue the discussion there, but I don't want to waste your time, Matt. Like if it's ultimately not something that's going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So the sketch took me like half an hour to an hour to write based on what was in my head. A proposal will probably take me 2 days. So yeah, if I can avoid spending 2 days, that'd make me happy.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So yeah, maybe send an email to the group as well, just kind of to get a little more attention on it.
Got it.
But yeah, feel free to move on then.
Okay. So related to that, was another idea. I've actually had this idea twice now in slightly different contexts, which is so my proposal, my failure domains proposal, involves a failure domain policy controller. So essentially, we have some independent controller which is watching a set of machines and is not able and can provide a specific failure domains to those machines, but it is also able to do reconciliation. So it now, unlike KCP, has a day 2 opportunity to notice that the set of machines that it is managing is out of spec. So yeah, we were supposed to be distributed across these 3 failure domains, but maybe the policy got updated and now the failure domains are different, or there's more, or maybe a machine got deleted or something, or a new one got added, or it got live migrated or something like that. So the question is, what would it do about it in those circumstances? And my first thought was it could just delete it. But the more I think about it, I suspect that would end up having nasty edge cases in cases where the machine has some other controller owner, like KCP or a machine set. So I was wondering, I know we don't currently have this. Would it be worth adding a contract whereby something other than the controller owner, it might be a failure domain policy controller, or it might be the infrastructure machine provider, for example. So yeah, the OpenStack machine controller might say, this machine now appears to be out of spec. It should be considered for reconciliation. This is different to, so when I brought this up before, I ended up being pointed towards MHCs. I think this is quite different to machine health checks. It's not node related. The node isn't necessarily malfunctioning. It's just out of spec. Yeah, if we could add some standard, well-documented part of the API contract that says a machine with a dirty condition, for example, any controller owner, when it is reconciling the set of machines that it manages, it will take a dirty condition into account according to whatever constraints that it has. So yeah, KCP is going to take etcd into account or whatever. Go ahead, Mike. Or anybody else.
Was someone else, I think, was someone else going to go first? Matt? Okay, maybe not. So you know, tangentially, like this would be really helpful with Carpenter as well. And just to add in another term of art here, Carpenter calls this drift instead of like dirty. So they say like if the spec of the underlying node has drifted from like what the cluster wants, right? It's looking at it another way. Like it likes to think about Kubernetes version and see like when it's drifted. But this is kind of a similar type of thing where when it sounds like you're saying when the spec has drifted away from what the underlying instance is, then you want to have some way to notify it and say notify the controllers to say pick this up again. I mean, doesn't this kind of like change some of the core behavior though of CAPI, I guess, like in terms of reconciling like the machine objects and whatnot?
So for me, this would not be something that would result in reconciling a machine object. So I'm not proposing that machine objects become mutable. I'm saying that if the provider, for example, so if the OpenStack machine controller notices, we were supposed to be on this failure domain over there, that's what our spec says, but I've been live migrated and now I'm somewhere else. So I'm I'm going to set my dirty flag or my drift flag or whatever, and then I'm going to do nothing. And what I'm expecting is that the machine set that created me is gonna scan, and it's gonna say, oh look, that one's drifted. I'm now gonna, you know, if it's convenient, if it meets my any other requirements I have on this machine set, like node availability or whatever, I'm gonna try and reconcile this. Or if I have to do a reconcile anyway, I'm gonna pick this one first because it needs to be deleted anyway.
And then like the nature of the, I guess just to understand the nature of kind of the dirtiness or whatever that gets in here, because I wouldn't expect that once you've created a machine, I wouldn't expect that the instance has actually like changed underneath it. But what would be the kind of changes that like the MHC, you know, we're looking for like conditions and stuff like that come up on the nodes or whatever. But would this be like what would I guess walk me through a user case, I guess, you know?
So there, I've got two specific ones. Yeah, one is failure domains and one is the machine controller. So the machine controller may notice that the infrastructure resource that it created is no longer corresponds to the spec that it has. And that might be because of a live migration, or because it might be because the admin went in and poked a new network interface onto it, or something. So that so that's one type of drift, and the other one is external policy drift. So, for example, if I've got this this external failure domain controller, and my failure domain controller, I've defined in my failure domain policy, I want to spread my control plane over AZ1, 2, and 3. And then for whatever reason, I changed that policy to be, I now want to spread my policy over AZ1, 2, and 4. My failure domain policy controller can go and find the one that's in AZ3 and mark it as dirty, and then do nothing. And it will, and all KCP has to do is notice that one of its machines is dirty, and then at a time that makes sense for KCP, it can delete that machine. And at a time that makes sense for KCP, it can create a new machine, and the new machine will be created in policy.
So I have to play devil's advocate here. Because what you've described to me, like, why does that have to be part of CAPI, right? Couldn't I just have a controller that adds annotate? Like, this sounds like KCP wants to know when something's dirty so that it can do activity with cluster API, right? And the policy changes you're talking about, those may not have to do with cluster API, right? Those might be like, I want to change the way these things are distributed or whatever. Or are you saying that I would like I make a change in the machine set to talk about the topology changes, and then that is kind of like cascading the dirtiness down to the machines or whatever? Maybe I'm misunderstanding that part.
So this is a convention for communicating dirtiness to a machine controller, and KCP is just one example because it controls the control plane machines in a kubeADM cluster. But yeah, the machine set controller might be another one, and that is CAPI. So, for example, one of the things the failure domain controller would allow you to do, which I know I've seen users asking for before, is to define a failure domain policy on workers. So yeah, if I define failure domain policy on my machine deployment, yeah, then in that case, if the policy is updated and a particular machine is now out of spec, the thing that I would want to respond to that is the machine set. But at the same time, if the policy only specifies 2 AZs and just says in general spread, if I change one of those 2 AZs, I don't want to go and delete half my machines all at the same time. I want to set half of them to be dirty and then say, a machine set, do something sensible with that according to your own policy. Fabrizio?
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. First of all, I think that the idea that the controller that owns the machine, so will be responsible for rotating machine is the way to go. We experienced this with remediation and a couple of other problems. And because I think the key point is that not only we want the machine to be remediated, but we want the machine to be, the machine to be rotated, but we want the machine to be rotated in a controlled way, which is the let me say, the next part of the story. So if you delete it directly, the machine will go away, but it is sort of uncontrolled. Instead, you want to not delete, but mark for a controlled deletion, something like that. And so I think the key part is we have really to think about what kind of control we want on deletion, because currently we already have two mechanisms that follow this pattern. So one is we have a bunch of annotation that you can add on machine. So they basically influence the machine that will be deleted as soon as a rotation happens. So I kind of say, oh, next time that you delete a machine, pick this one. This one goes on top of the priority. This is a mechanism. It is already there. It is implemented for both machine deployment and I think also KCP. But the caveat is that you label a machine to be the first one to be deleted, but deletion do not happen until a rollout is triggered. So there is the caveat. I don't know if it is good for this case. The second mechanism that we have is the mechanism that was built around remediation. So you basically you say this machine has to be remediated, and MSC has its own idea of what is an acceptable remediation, how much aggressive it should be, etc., etc. And basically, MSC and the controller take care of this remediation. So we already have something. I don't know if it fits in the use case or not. I like the part of the approach where we basically give the responsibility to controllers owning the machine to do the actual deletion. What is key to define in this case is what kind of control do we have? The same control that we have in machine deployment, the same control that we have in, I don't know, in max surge or max unavailable. That's the key part of the problem.
Thank you, Fabrizio. I just want to step in here because we only have about 15 minutes left and we have a couple more orders of business to get to. And there were also some questions that came up in chat, Matt. Is there like an issue or an enhancement related to this yet? Because I guess that's kind of where I'm going as the next step here. I think we need something to kind of chew on and discuss, I think, in a more asynchronous manner. Like there's some really good ideas here, and I think it's definitely getting people's attention, and it seems like something that could be very useful as well. But I think yeah, we're not going to solve it in the next 13 minutes, and we probably have a couple other things to get to as well.
Yeah, that's enough for me, to be honest. That there is enough interest to write it up properly. Andrea, if you have a link to the upgrades or external controller proposal, I'd be very interested in that because that's not something I'm aware of. Apart from anything else, Mike, I'm happy to move on.
Cool. And Matt, thank you for bringing these topics. It's really good discussion, interesting, kind of deep stuff. So thank you again. David, you've got the next topic on some feedback on having a centralized repository. Please.
Yeah, sure. So as we know, there's kind of two paths today to install the core cluster API cluster CTL or the cluster API operator chart. And so that's great. But for the people who want to use the cluster API operator path, it is convenient to continue down a Helm route in terms of provisioning your actual clusters, right? So right now you can use cluster CTL generate, that generates a template, which is kind of a, one-off, piece of code that you can go provision. When you're using GitOps, Helm charts are extremely convenient to stamp out many instances of clusters, and therefore, we really, at least with CapZ, want to have an actual Helm chart, at least for managed clusters, for AKS clusters. The thing that I guess the thing that comes up that came up in about an almost hour discussion, which is linked to in the Slack channel, back to our thread, if you care to hear our dialogue, was perhaps we should consider more of a community place for other providers, other people who want to have Helm charts that go and provision those things, because there could be a lot of reuse. There also could be an ease of reference for let's say just doing a Helm repo add for one repository as opposed to various providers. It also offers a little cleaner role of separation in terms of Helm chart maintenance versus the actual core provider maintenance. These are some of the kind of trade-offs with should each provider, for instance, decide to host their Helm chart inside the repository or somewhere else, or in what I'm proposing and desiring feedback from here is the idea of, let's say, a Kubernetes SIG's cluster API charts. It could be named something different, but just some kind of centralized Helm chart repository. So I'll stop. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It makes sense to me. Did anybody have comments on that?
Yeah, or any general, if there's any general objections to using Helm for this, or whatever with Helm plus cluster API things noodle in your mind, that would be good, because I guess prior to me joining this project space some time ago, I guess there was more discussion in this space apparently.
I guess the only thing that comes up that I'm thinking of off the top of my head is I know we have the add-ons provider, and I thought there were some Helm charts in there. Is that, it's not quite the same thing, but I wonder, is there any sort of overlap in terms of collaboration or something?
Yeah. So Jonathan on my team is the one who kind of led the charge on the cluster API provider for Helm, and that is totally separate. That is very useful, right? It's how one way that you could bootstrap GitOps or whatever else with Helm charts on cluster API. But the thing that is missing is the experience of stamping out many clusters at scale, and you can do that without a Helm chart, but you need to use customize or some other things, and really just because whether you're using Flux or Argo, they have a built-in Helm chart provider. That makes it very easy to have one chunk of code to stamp out various flavors of said clusters, right? So that's the thing that we're talking about here, unrelated to the CapH provider. Okay,
cool. Yeah, I didn't think they were the same, but I thought maybe there was some area for collaboration. But thank you for clarifying that. I guess the question is for kind of next steps, since I'm not seeing a lot of hands going up, or I'm not seeing any hands going up. I don't know if it makes sense to maybe create an issue or an enhancement, but maybe defining kind of what you want to do, or just make the repo in your make what you think what the repo would look like in your own personal GitHub, and then we could use that as a discussion topic to say, okay, I think it should look like this. Maybe the next step is we could donate that to the Kubernetes SIGs org, and take it to the next level. Because one of the things that I'd be concerned about is kind of like the extended effects of like maintenance and everything. Like it's one thing if we just have a repo where we bring all this stuff together and we can like iterate rapidly on it. It's another thing once we get it into kube SIGs and we've got all the prow mechanisms and everything there, and then it's like, okay, now maintaining this is like an official thing, and we need to make sure that we're doing kind of the regular updates on it. So like I would want to know that, you know, A, we have a group of people who want to kind of get involved in this, and then B, like those people are willing to kind of do that for a while. So this might be the kind of thing where it's like, if you start this as a personal project or as like a, you know, like a team project or something, and you can start to build kind of collaboration there, and then you can demonstrate it and say, okay, we've got a community that are starting to use this thing. We've got people who know where to go, who have been maintaining it. Then it becomes a much easier choice for the community to say, okay, yeah, let's get this in kube SIGs. Let's get the owner's files updated, those kind of stuff. So I don't know if that helps you at all, but that's kind of what I'm thinking just off the top of my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so yeah, and this is a part of the reason I'm bringing it up as well, not just for feedback, but also for awareness. So anyone else who's interested in having kind of a centralized, more visible Helm chart for stamping out cluster API clusters, yeah, let me know, ping me. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for bringing it up, David. That's a good topic. So the last question we had here was from Yong Shang about will Cluster API cover everything offered by EKS Anywhere? And thank you, Nolan, for adding a little detail there. I'm not sure what EKS Anywhere is. Do we have anyone on the call who might know more about that or could offer kind of some advice about the feature parity or anything?
EKS Anywhere is the effort to support to extend EKS to multiple providers like bare metal, which is a Tinkerbell, and also some vSphere, that kind of thing, and also some we totally there are around 6 or 8 providers. Yeah, EKS Anywhere.
Well, I guess, yeah, I would have to do more reading about this, but I imagine if it uses the normal Amazon interfaces, then perhaps the AWS provider would work, or perhaps they would have to have a special provider of its own written for EKS Anywhere. I think Nolan's suggestion in the comments is probably the best thing. Go to the Cluster API AWS channel, is where the AWS kind of maintainers hang out. They might be able to give you a more clear idea of what of if there's a story around EKS Anywhere yet.
All right, yeah. Actually, more closer one is Cluster API bare metal and Cluster API vSphere. Yeah, those kind of things. Yeah, there are such concepts.
I guess if this is like putting EKS on top of bare metal so that you have the same interfaces, then it almost sounds a little bit like the AWS, what's it called, Outpost, or the AWS where you can have like your own on-premises installation of it. If the interfaces are the same, I would imagine Cluster API could be made to work in a similar manner.
Yeah, actually, you can say any word for bare metal. Just use the Cluster API underneath.
Okay. Chris, you got your hand up, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say for the bare metal solution, they do use Cluster API along with Tinkerbell to deploy it. So that's probably where the connection to Cluster API came from. Whether or not it can do the same feature parity, I don't think it can, but it really kind of depends on what you're looking for. One thing you will get with Cluster API, raw Cluster API without EKS Anywhere, obviously you'll lose the interconnection with EKS and you won't be able to manage it through AWS, but you will get a lot simpler deployment, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Nolan, please.
Yeah, thank you everyone for pointing out that that there's the bare metal aspects to this. Also, Cluster API AWS does some orchestration of EKS from the CAPI side, so you can use CAPI to manage and generate EKS clusters. But like I mentioned here, I don't know if there's anyone that's like trying to use Cluster API AWS to drive EKS anywhere, which would sounds like it would drive Tinkerbell or Tinkerbell or vSphere. So yeah, this may be something you want to ask in these channels.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thanks for bringing the question up. All right, we got a couple minutes left and a few more announcements to get through here. So please, well, I guess I can take this one since it just says team. Or Matt, I don't know if you want to give this. The CapZ, there's a new patch release. Does anyone want to announce that? Okay, well, we got a new release for CapZ. Looks like 1.14.3, 1.13.5 are out. 1.15 is coming next. Nolan, you got the Kappa update, please.
Yeah, just letting folks know we did a feature release that has some new telco features for Kappa, and we also put it on Cappy 171. So that came out on Monday, and thank you everyone for getting the 1.7 line out.
Awesome, thank you. And Matt, a late breaking update on Capo.
Yeah, I didn't know release announcements were a thing. So we released v0.10 of Capo a couple of weeks ago now. This was a huge release for us. We have stabilized our API, called it v1 beta 1. Yeah, we're going to stop breaking our users. And we released 0.10.1 yesterday, which fixes a single bug.
Awesome. Bug fixing is good, even if it's a single. All right. Thank you, Matt. The last announcement is we're having a Carpenter feature group meeting in less than 1 minute in the same Zoom channel. So if you're interested in that, please stick around. And I think we'll have a discussion probably about scalable resources. So with that, we are at the end of our meeting time. Thank you, everyone, for all the excellent topics and discussion. And we'll see you next time.